And I think keeping people employed is the key. If we have a catalyst that starts to lay off people, and I will argue that artificial intelligence is a potential catalyst. If we have a catalyst that starts to lay off people, that is where you're going to get the imbalances become even greater political issues than they will be in the next year. And so, because it's a political year, for a presidential election in the United States, there will be a lot of politicians who will grab this concept and run with it about how people have been left behind, and you're going to get calls for greater taxes and some level of redistribution. And there will certainly be many of those arguments that are sound or worthwhile, worth considering and worth evaluating. But there will also be many that will just are barked out in order to try to garner votes, whether or not even though it'll never happen. And it's part of the problem with the whole MMT logic, in my opinion, is that it ignores human nature. MMT logic. So MMT was basically, and I'm sure MMT experts would tell me I'm wrong, but it's basically you spend a lot of money, and when you need to, when you start to get inflation and you have problems, then you raise taxes, you reduce spending. Problem with human nature is nobody ever wants to go the austerity route. It's everybody always,
people don't like pain.
Not at all. They won't vote for it. And so and yet that is what needs to happen, in my opinion. And so if in some level, and it's probably going to be in a lot of levels, I expect taxes will go higher. In which way this works out, I don't know, but taxes will go higher, spending will get cut. And in a weird way, or a perverse way, the interest expense will force some of these difficult decisions. And so the interest expense that will force some of these decisions will create, away from the interest expense for the rest of the pie, it will create a difficulty to expand that pie. And so away from interest expense, if rates go back down quickly, that exercise of not expanding healthcare, education, military, whatever you're looking at, whatever line item you're looking at, that exercise would be already underway, I think. So in some ways, I think a lot of people in the markets are so eager to welcome lower interest rates. And it's been this way from the day the Fed tightened the first tightening to a year and a half ago. Every single tightening was, well, that's the last one. The Fed's going to pivot. And you could just hit replay every Fed meeting, hit repeat. It's the same rap.
Well, a whole generation doesn't know any better, right? Like a whole generation of people in finance, right? So
yeah. And to be fair, like you said, they don't know any better. The Fed, that's been the solution, has always been to spend more money, for the government to spend more and for the Fed to cut rates. And the problem is, over decades, that solution has become the problem. And so now, every time, if you just give away money again, we're going to get inflation. If you give away money and lower rates to zero again, we're going to be back in this inflation problem. So the Fed, it's really interesting that people will sit here and say, well, what got us into this problem was free money and way too much fiscal spending. And then you talk to them, you'll say, well, what has to happen if the economy slows? well, we got to lower the cost of money and give more out. It's literally it's a very difficult thing to have a conversation on, because it's almost like a year ago, Powell said everyone's going to feel pain. No one's felt pain.